Engineer Libiwa.
Speaker, sir, I have two supplementary questions for Minister. I think good to hear about installing more CCTV, doors, etc. All those are hardware, infrastructure. I would like to ask, is there a more concerned, deep-rooted culture of sexual harassment in our campuses? And if there is, what action is going to be taken to eliminate this deep-rooted culture of sexual harassment? And the second question is, I think what we need is education or even campaign on zero tolerance towards sexual harassment. So in this aspect, is there anything that can be done? Thank you.
First question on, is there a deep-rooted trend on sexual harassment? Sexual harassment versus sexual misconduct, there are several types. Of course, there is the most serious. You've got outrage of modesty, sexual assault. You have sexual harassment. You can also have the big bulk, 2/3 is still voyeurism. Yeah. So based on the data I gave just now, there has not been a rising trend in the last 3 years. However, I do also acknowledge all the explanations that some of the literature has given, including the big read article on Today I mentioned earlier, that the young today grow up with internet, they're exposed to pornographic websites, they know of miniature photography and recording devices, and sometimes they get it through their WhatsApp. And over time, they may have the idea that actually this is no big deal. So I think this is what we worry about. It doesn't manifest in terms of higher incidence rates, at least over the last 3 years, it has been constant, but we do worry about these underlying trends. So I do agree with the members, we need to send a strong signal, and I think it has to be a combination of measures between what I and Minister Indranee have talked about, tougher penalty, education, physical security, improve the physical security, as well as better support for both the victims as well as sometimes for the offenders in counseling them and helping them turn over a new leaf.
Ms. Cheryl Chan.
I've got two questions for Minister Ong. The first one is, had this incident not been taken on the social media and gained so much attention, would the Ministry and the AUs have taken actions to review the disciplinary framework? That's the first question. The second, it's because you mentioned that the AUs are now undergoing this full review. When they are ready, would the Ministry ensure that the revisions are adequate and serve its purpose?
Sorry, I didn't catch your first question because I thought I just announced they will review their framework. What?
Yeah, it's true, but then the thing is, if this incident was not taken to social media and hasn't gained that much attention, would the Ministry and the AUs already have taken this? Because in the last 3 years, although there was no increase in rates,
I see.
Should
we not have done this earlier, in other words? The AUs do review their discipline framework from time to time. The NUS one was reviewed about 5 years ago, and I think they probably is due for review. But I think what this incident taught all of us is that there is a stronger concern and some underlying trend. And I think we do need to make it tougher at the egregious end of the offense. Should we have done this earlier? I wish we have. But I think there are many things that we do sometimes ahead of time, and we are also being questioned, why do you do it now? Are you going to open up other problems? In this case, unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I think what is more important is immediate action is being taken now, and I'm confident there will be swift and decisive actions. Second question, how do we know that it will be adequate? I think after this whole furore, the AUs all understand the implications of this. I've given them my written advice and policy guidance that they have to do a thorough review, and I'm sure all of them will take it very seriously.
Mr. Lim Beltran.
Thank you, Speaker. I just wanted to ask the Minister, I thought 37 cases of voyeurism over 3 years was quite a lot. And frankly, I'm quite disappointed that the AUs did not take earlier action to deal with to review their processes to better deal with the complaints. I'm just wondering whether Minister review why didn't the AU take further action, having seen the number of cases that have been reported over 3 years. Because if we don't get to the root of the problem, then whatever we do, the AUs will not do anything to review the process until the matter goes up to social media. So that's one point. Two other queries. Do the reported cases of voyeurism, or can the reported cases of voyeurism be publicized in campus newsletter to alert students of the extent of the problem? And also whether the Minister will consider asking the AUs to also publicize punishment of offenders to students in the AUs, so that there's also a learning message for everyone that there is some deterrent effect if the offenders must know that, or potential offenders must know that there would be appropriate punishment for them.
Question is, again, looking back, why didn't we realize this is serious? I think, of course, we wish that there was a realization that this is a serious offense. Voyeurism is a rising concern. But having said that, today, after this incident, I believe the AUs are all very aware, and I'm confident they will do something swift and decisive. I'm confident of that, and we'll work closely with them. As to publicizing the punishment, NUS actually have been publicizing the cases, the sexual misconduct cases, and the punishment that has been meted out to them. It's actually available on their student website, which is why after the incident, this latest incident, there were several press reports about past cases because it was publicly available within the NUS website. I think we can publicize, but fundamentally, is what I mentioned, the penalties are just not stiff enough. I think we just need to toughen them up and send a strong signal that at the most egregious end of the offences, there must be very stiff punishment.
Mr. Leon Pereira.
Thank you, sir. I just have one supplementary question for Minister Indranee. So, Minister Indranee alluded to the infrastructural changes that are happening in NUS now, the retrofitting of the shower cubicles, the locks, additional security cameras and so on. It is a shame that it took this incident of Ms. Monica Bay coming forward before these changes were actually made, given the number of voyeurism offences that had taken place in the previous years. So my supplementary question would be, are these infrastructural changes to enhance security being done across the board, for all the IHLs, and is there a time frame for this to be carried out? Thank you.
The short answer is that all the IHLs are reviewing their security arrangements. In the case of NUS, they've already embarked on it, and they expect it to be completed in the coming months. And for the other AUs, they'll have to complete their review. But the short answer is that they're all looking at it, and their priority is to make sure that the campus is safe for students.
Ms. Anthea Ong.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Minister if, given that this is happening across all the AUs and maybe other IHLs, are we looking to introduce codes and standards to universities and IHLs to help them prevent and manage sexual harassment on campus? A second question is, are we considering, given the numbers that you have shared, a kind of cross-campus body that would help to manage such incidents? Because I'm wondering if a student actually do not stay in a university because he's been found to have committed a misconduct or an act, would he then go to another university? And so is there this cross-campus sharing of information, and therefore maybe that warrants a body to be set up? Thank you.
I think the first thing to remember is that, it doesn't take codes and regulations to understand that taking videos of somebody bathing is wrong. that is not rocket science. It just needs certain fundamental values, which is that you must respect other people, respect their privacy, respect their physical space, respect their emotional space. So we can, and the universities, the AUs, will be embarking, as I mentioned in my earlier response, embarking on better education for the students. But fundamentally, it boils down to values. That is a function partly of parents, partly of school and teachers, and the individual himself or herself. Because if you adhere to that, you don't actually need to have codes and regulations. So the key thing is really making sure that individuals understand that something like this is not a light offense, it's not a light thing. It will be taken seriously, and it will be dealt with seriously and appropriately as well. But there's also the other aspect, which is rehabilitation. Because in some cases, either they have a problem that needs to be dealt with, and it may require counseling, it may require additional treatment for those who are mentally not well. So that is another aspect that we'll be looking at. Values, education, rehabilitation.
Mr. Ang Wei-Nan.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a follow-up question for Mr. Indranee on the security arrangement of the hostels. I understand that the students at the controversy of this NUS Peeping Tom incident, he said that he was at the hostel after midnight with the intention to stay over at his girlfriend's hostel room, even though he's not a person to stay in the hostel. So I would like to ask, what is the security arrangement for the NUS hostel and other hostels in other universities, where they allow people to go in the hostel after midnight, and what is the response from the university? Thank you.
The students can and do visit their friends in other hostels. So I think that this particular incident will be cause for the universities to reflect on how that arrangement should be managed. Because obviously you don't want to prevent friends from coming to see each other, but the proper recording and the security arrangements for that should be in place. So in short, as a result of this, I think the universities will be reviewing that much more closely.
I have to add, we need to do some firm measures, but also be careful not to overreact to the extent of not allowing students to visit each other or staying over. These, after all, university campuses, and I think we can have a lively campus without having all the dangers and security lapses, which we will tighten up, no doubt.
Ms. Fumiha.
Thank you, Speaker. I have two supplementary questions for Minister. I appreciate the discretion that the respective AUs have to review their procedure in the light of Monica Bay's ordeal, but I would like to ask the Minister, would he think there is room for some form of minimum standards that the Ministry of Education would prescribe to the respective boards that's reviewing the different measures, to ensure there are some kind of minimum standards to which the disciplinary action that will be melted out? It's really kind of sending that strong signal that Minister referred to. Secondly, the safety measures, what would be some minimum standards where people live on halls that will have to observe? And last but not least, what would be some of the minimum standards on training and skills for the counsellors dealing with this sensitive matter of people being subject to sexual harassment? Thank you.
I think we also need to respect the fact that they are autonomous universities, having their own board and really govern themselves in a fairly independent way, separate from MOE. So for us to issue standards or codes or rules to the universities, I think it would not be appropriate. We can do that for polytechnics because they are statutory boards. We can do that for IT. But for autonomous university, they are differently incorporated and structured. But having said that, when I first issued my public statement that the penalties are manifestly inadequate, I think they all understood the standard that I was looking for. And I'm sure we'll work together not by MOE issuing rules and regulations, but through discussion, moral suasion, I'm sure we can come up with something feasible and workable and effective.
Associate Professor Walter Teixeira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, just two questions for the Minister. I think the first is on the issue of standards. I think the concern here is that if, for example, what attracts a suspension in one university might only attract a reprimand or expulsion in another, then there would be a sense of injustice that the universities differ significantly on the standards, and that is why I think it is important that the Ministry does come in, I think, with this suasion and coordinated approach. The second question is that I think when we look at the disciplinary committees, there is some concern that they may not have the right expertise or skills to discharge all of their functions because, frankly, they are not the police or the Attorney General's chambers. They are not professional adjudicators or finders of fact. So I wonder what can the Ministry do here to ensure that these committees have the skills necessary to interview the parties concerned, to investigate and to assure the public that justice is being done here.
The first question of inconsistencies across AUs, I wouldn't call that inconsistencies. Different AUs may well have slightly different disciplinary action, just as different companies will have different disciplinary actions when there are offenses. Having said that, researchers and academics, they stick to the discipline of peer review very closely, and I have no doubt in this aspect there will be some peer review going on. Second question is, expertise. The disciplinary boards or the review committees will need to have certain members, including having student representatives. But of course, if they need enforcement or legal advice, I'm sure they can ask for it and they are able to tap on it. After all, it's a university, lots of different talent with different expertise. So I think we need to give them some time, some space to get that work done.